So, let's talk about one of the biggest questions out there. How in the world do we become the people we are? I mean, it's this incredible journey from our very first cry, to our first words, to our first really big thoughts. Today, we're going to look at some of the major ideas, the big theories that try to make sense of it all. No, really, just take a second and think about it. What was it that shaped you? Your personality, what you're afraid of, what you dream about? Was it something deep inside you, the world you grew up in, or maybe the way you figure things out for yourself? This isn't just some abstract question, it's literally the story of you and me. Okay, so before we dive in, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. When we say development, what we're really talking about are these patterns of growth and change that happen over time. It's not just random stuff. There is a predictable way we grow that affects how we act, how we think, and how we feel. And to understand that process, we need theories. Now, a theory isn't just a wild guess. It's more like a framework, an organized set of ideas that helps us explain what's going on and maybe even predict what's coming next. You can think of it like a lens that helps bring a part of the picture into focus. So, here's what we've got on tap. We're going to tackle that big question, what makes us us? By looking through 3 different lenses. First, our inner world, then how we work as a learning machine, and finally, how we're active thinkers. After that, we'll pull it all together to see the whole shebang. Let's get started with that first lens. All right, our first lens takes us right inside our own minds. This perspective, known as the psychodynamic view, basically says that who we become is shaped by a whole lot of drama and conflict happening inside of us. It's an idea that, honestly, changed the way we think about ourselves. So the core idea here is that we grow in stages. And at each stage, there's this constant tug of war going on. On one side, you have our basic biological drives, what we want, what feels good. And on the other side, you've got what society expects of us. And how we figure out that conflict, well, that leaves a huge mark on our personality. And of course, you can't talk about this without bringing up Sigmund Freud. He pictured our personality as this epic battle. You've got the id, which is kind of like that little devil on your shoulder, just wanting instant gratification. Then there's the superego, the angel, telling you what's right and wrong. And caught right in the middle, that's the ego, basically the referee, trying to make a decision that works in the real world. Now, here's the thing about Freud. His huge contribution was getting everyone to understand that our early childhood experiences are so important in shaping the adults we become. That was a game changer. But it's also true that a lot of his more specific ideas just haven't really held up when we put them to a scientific test. But the story didn't end there. One of Freud's followers, Erik Erikson, took these ideas and ran with them. He said, hey, this doesn't just stop in childhood. He believed we face these kinds of conflicts our whole lives. You can see it here. As a baby, the big question is trust versus mistrust. Can I rely on people? But then, when you're a teenager, the crisis is totally different. Identity versus role confusion, the classic who am I question. Each stage of life has its own unique puzzle to solve. Okay, let's put that lens down and pick up a completely different one. This next perspective pretty much flips the script. It says, forget the inner world for a second, let's look at the outside world because our environment is the real author of our life story. I mean, listen to this quote from John Watson, the guy who started this whole school of thought called behaviorism. It's intense, right? He's basically saying that he can take any baby and with the right training, turn them into anything. A doctor, a lawyer, an artist, you name it. For these guys, it's all about nurture. So this idea breaks down into 2 main types of learning. On one side, you have conditioning, which is all about learning directly from experience. You've got classical conditioning, which is learning by association, and operant conditioning, which is just a fancy way of saying we learn from rewards and punishments. Simple. But then there's this whole other way we learn, which is indirectly. This image shows classical conditioning perfectly. A baby sees a fluffy white rat and thinks, cool, a pet, no fear. But if every time the baby sees the rat, there's a super loud, scary noise, well, pretty soon the baby learns to connect the two. After a while, just seeing the rat is enough to make the baby cry. A new fear has been learned. But wait, there's more. A psychologist named Albert Bandura came along and said, you know what, we're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. He argued that we don't just learn from our own direct experiences. We learn a ton just by watching and copying other people. And this is how he proved it, with his famous Bobo doll experiment. Kids watched an adult either play nicely with this doll or just go to town on it, punching it, kicking it, screaming at it. And what happened later? Well, the kids who saw the aggressive adult did the exact same things.
It's this incredible demonstration of how much we're influenced by the role models around us.
And now for our third and final lens. This one kind of argues with the other two. It says, hold on, we're not just pushed around by our inner urges or programmed by our environment. No, we are active builders. We construct our own understanding of the world.
The hero of this story is Jean Piaget, and his idea was just revolutionary. He said kids aren't just tiny, empty adults waiting for us to pour knowledge into their heads. No way. They're like little scientists out there in the world, touching things, tasting things, constantly running experiments to figure out how it all works.
According to Piaget, kids build these things called schemas, which are basically mental models for how the world works. So a baby might have a schema for fruit that says fruit is sweet and yummy. But then, one day, they bite into a lemon. Whoa, that does not fit the model. So they have to adjust their thinking, update their schema to make room for this new idea that, okay, some fruit is super sour. That's learning in action.
And Piaget actually mapped this all out into 4 distinct stages. It starts with babies learning purely through their senses, then kids develop symbolic thought, then concrete logic, and finally, as teenagers, they reach the stage where they can think abstractly and scientifically. Each step is like a complete software upgrade for the brain.
Okay, so we've looked through 3 very different lenses. Now, for the final and maybe most important part, let's step back and see how they all fit together to give us the full picture. This really sums it up perfectly. Each theory shines a spotlight on a different, crucial part of the story. The psychodynamic lens shows us our deep emotional currents. The learning lens highlights the massive power of our environment. And the cognitive lens celebrates our own amazing, curious minds.
And that right there is the key takeaway. Human beings are just way too complicated for any one theory to explain everything. If you really want to understand a child, or heck, even yourself, you can't just pick one lens. You have to be willing to look through all of them. That's how you get the richest, most complete view of the incredible journey of growing up.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. When you look back at your own life, your own story, which lens seems to fit the best? Do you see the story of your inner conflicts, the influence of your environment, or your own journey as a little scientist figuring things out? The real answer, of course, is probably a little bit of all 3.